Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make baking supplies for a stuffed animal. A few people have been requesting this and I actually really love baking, so I thought this would be a great one to do. Now let's get started! Okay, the first thing I'm going to make is a rolling pin, and this is pretty simple. All I'm going to need is a wooden dowel and some paper, and I've already cut my wooden dowel to about 4 inches. I'll be honest, I just found it cut to this size so I used it, but you can make this any size you want. This and everything I make in this video is probably a little bit small for a Build-A-Bear, but most of these you can make bigger if you want to. Also, another thing I did was sand the edges of the wooden dowel a little bit, because usually rolling pins have more rounded ends, but this is optional and you barely notice it. Okay, so now I'm going to take these strips of paper I've already cut. They are 2.5 inches, and I just got this measurement by comparing it to my wooden dowel and reducing that measurement by 1.5 inches. So now all I'm going to do is start rolling this paper around the middle of the wooden dowel, and I'll be applying glue to the paper as I go. And honestly, the trickiest part is just centering it on the wooden dowel and making sure you're rolling it up straight. So you might have to go a little bit slow, and it's okay if you have to unravel it if you figure out you're not going straight. I definitely had to do this a few times, and in the end it wasn't perfect, but I tried to get it at least even on both sides. What I mean by that is if you start seeing the edges of the paper kind of form a spiral on one side, it means you're not rolling completely straight, but when I add the next strip of paper, I just make sure to cover that up. You can keep adding paper until it is as thick as you want. I thought I'd need more than 3, but this was actually perfect for me, probably because I found this paper that's a little bit thicker than printer paper. Okay, next, I'm going to try to change up the look of this a little bit by adding a stain to the wooden handles. And what I actually plan to do is make this look like my rolling pin, which is like an olive wood, so it's a little bit darker and more orangey. But as you saw in the intro, I did not follow through on that. I just did this on the handles. And that's because I did not really trust myself to be able to do a convincing wood look using just paint, because I've tried to do that kind of thing in the past with stuff like marble, and that was not the most convincing. So I decided to just keep the clean look of the white paper. If you have wood print scrapbook paper though, that would be great to use. Now here it is when it's done. I think it turned out really cute and could really work to roll out maybe some fake dough. Or real dough, I guess, if it isn't too wet. Okay, the next thing I'm going to make is a whisk. Here I have some 18 gauge craft wire, and you could probably make this out of thin strips of cardstock, but I wanted mine to be more sturdy and, I guess, real looking. So the first thing I'm doing is measuring how big I want the whisk to be. I decided for it to be about 3 inches, but it ended up being bigger because I made the handle longer. I'm using my finger to mark where I've measured, and now I'm grabbing a marker, a really thick marker, to use as kind of a mold for the first loop of the whisk. And when I get to the bottom, I'm going to bend the wire back up to the top, then I'm bending it over that first loop I made in a similar shape. I meant to use the marker more to help me shape this, but I only ended up using it for the first one, I think. Then I'm going to do this 2 more times, making sure the wire isn't overlapping directly, but you can always adjust them later. You could honestly leave it with 2 loops, that would also look fine, but I wanted mine more full, so I did it 2 more times. Once I finish the last one, I'm going to bring that all the way down and trim it off. Then I'm just trying to squeeze together the bottom of the whisk and readjust those loops at the top. Next, I'm going to take some string. I'm using some embroidery floss, and I'm just going to start wrapping it around where I want the handle of the whisk to start. And I'm first feeding it through the middle to secure the end, and then I can just start wrapping the string around the base of the whisk. I meant to do just like 1 layer of string going all the way down, but I was kind of doubling up, so I just tried to make it even as I was going. I even tried to kind of squeeze the ends together with pliers, but I don't think it did that much. Once I'm done, I'm just going to secure the end of the string with some glue. Now, I don't want the handle to just be string, so next I'm going to be wrapping this with some very thick paper. I'm not sure where I got it, I just found it in my room, but I made the width how long I want the handle to be, so now I'm making use of that marker and just curling it a little to help. And then I can start wrapping this around the base of the whisk. Since I made my handle longer, half the handle is actually hollow, but I don't mind that. It's still held up on its own. But I only wrapped it about 2 or 3 times before I just sealed it with glue, and since this paper is really thick, I just had to hold it together for a little bit. Once it's dry, I'm going to paint this, and you can do whatever color you want, but I'm going to go for one of those more fancy whisks and paint it silver. Yes, I finally bought some silver paint after talking about it in so many videos, and I will say it was worth it. I also tried to paint the inside hollow part just in case you see the white inside. And after it dries, this mini whisk is done. This really does work as a whisk, but you can't really wash it because it has paper. but I'm really happy with how realistic this turned out. The next thing I'm going to make is a mixing bowl. I'm going to be making this out of one of those little plastic containers you get from like gumball machines that sell toys. So I've had this little guy saved for years, just waiting for a craft to do with it, and it's finally time. The toy is this little squishy hippo that I love, but he kind of smells like chemicals, so I keep him in the container. I know it already pretty much looks like a bowl, but I'm going to be doing a few things to it, and the first one being adding a little flat piece on the bottom so it's able to stand. So here I have a little piece of packaging plastic that I used a hole punch to cut out. And it was honestly a little too small to make the bowl stand, so I should have used a bigger piece, but I struggled so much using a hole punch to cut this, I just had to use it. And I'm just using barely any glue from a glue gun to put this on. After that, it was able to balance, but it still was not very stable, so maybe a better choice would be like an applesauce cup or one of those fruit cups. Or if this is for a bigger stuffed animal, you probably already have a little bowl at home that is the right size for them. And now I'm going to paint the outside silver to be like one of those aluminum bowls, or maybe they're actually called stainless steel. But as I was doing this, I realized it looked exactly like one of those food covers. I looked it up and it's called a cloche. I knew there was a word for it. So if I turned the bowl upside down, it could also be a cover for a fancy meal. Speaking of meals, I actually have a video on how to make fake food for stuffed animals out of felt. None of them are meals, they're mostly dessert, but if you want to make the actual results of the baking, you can always watch that video. After a few more coats of paint, I let it dry, and here's the finished bowl. I probably should have done a few more coats of paint because you can kind of see through it from the inside, but I'm just happy I finally used that little container I've been saving all these years, and it looks exactly like the kind of mixing bowls I have. Now the last thing I'm going to make are baking pans. These are really easy, and all you need is aluminum foil. This one was already used but clean, so I saved it for this. I have this already folded in half, but you would probably fold this again one more time if you want it to be thicker. But now I'm going to place my mold for the circle pan, which is this empty roll of packing tape, and you can use anything round you find in your house for this. I'm just trimming it to a size that's easier to work with, and now all I'm going to do is start folding up the sides of the foil around this roll, and I'm trying to go around evenly so there aren't any major folds you see from the side, but I'm really just trying to shape it on as tight as possible and get the sides really flat. Once I have it as tight on there as possible, I can remove the mold and can start cutting down the sides to a normal height. I've heard cutting foil can dull your scissors, but I've also used it to sharpen my scissors, so if you're worried about that, maybe just use an older pair of scissors. The sides of cake pans are usually pretty short, so I actually ended up going around one more time to make it shorter, and this is how it looked. Now I'm going to do one more and make it a square pan, kind of like for brownies or something. And I'm first cutting out a square of foil, and then making some cuts at the corners, and you want them to be about as long as you want the sides to be tall. So now I can just start folding up the sides in alignment where I've made the cuts. Then I can start folding the tabs in so it forms kind of like a tray. And instead of using glue to hold this together, I'm actually going to use staples. That way I can really use this pan to cook things in the oven. And I did actually in the past make lemon bars in a pan like this, and I posted the video to Instagram. It was a really long time ago, but you can go on there for the full video. And after stapling everything together, I'm just going to sharpen those corners a little bit more, and that's it. I wanted to mention a few more things that I showed in the intro, one being this spatula. I made this in my how to make an apron video, so I'll link that video down below. And I recently found this really cool little measuring cup I had from like a perfume kit, and it's just the perfect size for measuring liquid ingredients, so I'm just going to throw this in with my baking supplies. Now I'm pretty sure that is all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and try some of these out. Please give this video a like, comment any video suggestions you have, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. I'll see you next time. Bye!
The lighting's so bad on this side, so go on the other side.
This side's worse. It's a